May I remind members, please, that when you speak, to stand and to turn on your microphone. There have been one or two comments from the grate outside that sometimes we forget to do that, and they can't hear us on the video recording. Okay, so apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies, Mr Mayor, from councillors Mrs Ewings, Mrs Roberts, Mrs Whitcomb and Councillor Shelton.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Please make any declarations now or as soon as you become aware of them. Councillor Sanders.
Mr Mayor, I clearly do have a declaration to make in relation to agenda item 6, public conveniences, being a member of West Edinburgh Council.
Indeed, thank you. Are there any other declarations? In which case, item 3, minutes of the council meeting, to confirm the minutes for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5 and 6. Are you happy that they are an accurate record of proceedings?
Yes.
You're happy for me to sign them off? Thank you. Okay. 3 little b, are there any matters arising not otherwise covered in this evening's agenda? Thank you. Items requiring a decision. Item 4, general finance, schedule of payments. Do you have any questions regarding the schedule of payments? Considered and endorsed? Okay, proposed, seconded, all in favour? Done, thank you. Little b, budget monitoring report. Consider and endorse. Do you have any questions, members? No? Propose and second? All in favour? Carried. Little c, year-end adjustments. As I understand it, this is just a heads-up as to what is to come. We don't actually have the year-end adjustment schedule at the moment, but it will be coming ere long, I imagine. So that's just for information. Which brings us on to Budget and Policy Committee. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to present the minutes of the Budget and Policy Committee held on Tuesday the 19th of February. 273 apologies for absence, 274 confirmation of minutes, 275 declarations of interest. Items for recommendation to Council. 276 public conveniences in Tavistock. There is a recommendation here, but we are going to look at this item as item 6 on tonight's agenda. So the items which are in the recommendations and in the minutes are reflected in the report which we received, and we will consider at a later time this evening. 277 Standing Order Revision Working Party. It's recommended that the notes of the meeting of the Standing Order Revision Working Party held on the 12th of February 2019 be received and the actions and recommendations included therein be endorsed and adopted.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've spoken to yourself and to the clerk and to the chairman of the Working Party Committee because I was concerned about the way that the language was ended up being drafted. That was not the substance of it, but the choice of where it had been put. In speaking with them, I believe that I've come up with an amendment that would be not terribly substantive, but would put the language in a way that we don't change as many parts of the standing orders as they are currently. And then, if anybody wants to talk about the substance, that would be separate. I've spoken about it with Carl, but because it's quite a long section, I don't know how best to actually present the amendment to the rest of the members. Basically, instead of, if you'd like, I can actually read it out or describe it.
Have you distributed a paper copy to members?
I haven't distributed
Okay.
it.
In which case, would you like to take us through it section by section?
Sure. So, currently, the way that the amendment is, if you look on, does everybody have the copy from the Working Party order in front of them? That was sent as a separate document originally. Yeah. That was sent separately to us on the 15th of February. Basically, it was deleting standing orders number 3, E, and F, and replacing them with new language. And what I would like to do instead is to leave E as is, except to say in accordance with X. And so the language that was added under the current format would be in X, so that you're not amending E and F as they currently stand. And then in F, we would leave F alone except for change the minutes, which currently they say 30 minutes. It would change it to 15 minutes, which is in accordance with what was in the working orders. And then finally, we would add an X, which would actually read exactly as F reads, except for I've codified it with little Roman numerals instead of bullet points. And I've changed the word mayor to chairman. Now, I have a copy, which I can show to anybody, of what I'm proposing. And I did send it to the mayor as well as the deputy mayor. And I've shown it to the chair of the working group and Carl.
Okay. Can I just hold you for a moment? There's quite a lot to digest there, members, I think, and it probably needs to take a little while just to absorb it. I think the clerk would just like to say a word or two.
Excuse me, just by way of context, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding it. This is in relation to the proposal that the public participation section, which currently is held outside of the meeting, so I'm talking about the public, I'm not talking about councillors or police or other parties, but for members of the public, actually comes into the council meeting, which it can do currently in accordance with your standing orders. And therefore, by bringing that in, it also provides, and the paragraph X, which Councillor Mann is referring to, is a protocol for the way in which the public will engage by virtue of giving notice of what it is they want to ask, of the way in which they ask it, and of the requirements that would apply for them to do so. So it's basically introducing a protocol whereby the public know how it is that they will be able to relate to the council during the council meeting when we get to that particular item, as opposed to the way in which, by convention up until now, we've had where it sat outside of the council meeting in the pre-council session. I hope that helps.
Members, questions and comments, please.
Why are we changing it? What's the actual rationale behind it?
The Working Party was happy with the language as it stood. However, when I was reading the actual standing orders, the E and F that have been amended in accordance with the language that the Working Party agreed on, and also Budget and Policy agreed, they give a broader authority to the Council, for instance, to ask members of the public to make to give evidence or answer questions. And I felt that by deleting that provision, we were limiting our ability to discuss with the public, possibly. I'm not sure that we are, but because Councillor Sanders actually said that we frequently actually suspend the standing orders when we do have members of the public come to speak to us, in which case none of this is really relevant. My concern at the time, though, is that E and F are standard language that has been supplied by the National Association of Local Councils, and for us to sort of tamper within them, I think is possibly, we might be messing with something that we don't really want to change. And because it has a broader authority there, as well as also the authority for the chairman to direct otherwise, which is in F currently, and that was deleted by the way that the working language had been inserted. And I don't think those were things we intended when the working group met. So I didn't want to change those two elements. So to leave those alone and then take the new language, which does direct, as Carl has described, the public a way to actually talk during the meeting. But to put that in a separate section, it also would allow us, the way that I've written it, would allow us to then amend that without amending all of the other bits of the standard language that the National Association of Local Councils has provided. So I just felt like it was less tinkering, and it stands alone on its own as a policy, which would mean it would be easier to remove if we didn't like the way it was working, or if it changed. If the next council decides they want to do something different, you could just delete the words in accordance with subsection X and delete X, as opposed to having to rewrite E and F again, which is, I think, more difficult when you come to it. So that's why I know it's a lot to bring on, but I do think it just in future would make it easier for us to handle changes to that policy.
Councillor Crawford.
Yes, thank you. It sounds very commendable, but I'd really like to see things in writing before I think I can vote on anything. So.
Can I call upon Councillor Sanders as the chairman of who chaired that particular meeting of the working group? What your comments are, please?
In response to Councillor Crawford, I agree with her. I've been sitting here thinking if there was a way that we could move this forward tonight with an understanding that that particular section perhaps needs to be circulated as a complete draft. I've only heard about it this evening, just before the start of the meeting. On the face of what I've seen, it looks to me as though it's a sensible suggestion. It looks as though it's a workable suggestion. It looks as though it will achieve what we were trying to achieve, which is, first of all, remove the public question time from the pre-meeting, which is currently not webcast, and shift that into the official meeting, which is webcast, so that if the public were to ask questions, they would be seen on the webcast, and it would be recorded, and we would have it there for posterity. Whilst at the same time, obviously, limiting the amount of time, and that's common practice in most councils, you would limit the amount of time that you set aside for public questions, in this instance 15 minutes, and equally you would limit the amount of time that any one individual speaker can speak for, down to 3 minutes, and that you would ensure that the question had to be submitted to the council at least 24 hours in advance, so it could be examined to ensure that it was not including anything which was potentially defamatory, offensive, etc. Because some of those things do occasionally happen. I can recall one occasion when we had that problem in this very chamber, and it got extremely serious, and we actually had to involve the police in the end because we couldn't manage to remove the individual from the chamber. So I think it's important that those things are in there. On the face of it, it looks very straightforward. I just wonder, in deference particularly to Councillor Crawford's point, whether we can find some method of moving the amendments as a whole, with this section to be written out and circulated to members and confirmed at a later date. And I don't think we need to throw the whole thing out or back again,
sure,
because that's going to take us, you know. If you're amenable, Mr. Mayor, I would probably move a motion to the effect that, unless there are any other queries or issues to be picked up by members on the standing order revision, I would move a motion that they be adopted, subject to this section being circulated to all members, and any comments coming back and being addressed at a subsequent meeting of the council. I'd be happy to do that. I think it will work. I'm just very reluctant because until Councillor Mann walked in this evening and accosted me, I haven't had the chance to think it through. On the face of it, it was quite accosted.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a sensible suggestion.
But that's what I'm prepared to move that, Mr. Mayor, if that's acceptable. But it's subject also to if there are any other queries relating to the rest of the things that other members might have.
I'd like to ask something, if I may. I'm just trying to understand, are we saying that we would end up effectively having a double dose of public representation within the meeting, the first part being without prior warning, and a second part with 24 hours notice of the question?
Absolutely not, as I understand it, and I would be very strongly against that. I think that the normal procedure with councils is to require notice, and certainly having 2 opportunities, I think, it's not necessary for one thing, and it would become incredibly confusing for another. So I think if this would be one section, it would be on the agenda. It would be an opportunity for members of the public to put questions. And I think it talks about making statements of some sort, can't remember now. But not a double dose, no. I would not support that, I'm afraid, in any way, shape or form.
Good, thank you very much, that helps. Members, any further questions? Well, again, if I may, perhaps I blinked and missed it or had a senior moment, but I hadn't appreciated that we had changed things such that we wouldn't be inviting the Devon County Councillor to come and present. Could that be clarified, please?
Yes, Mr Mayor. One of the other things to come out of that was that reports from a great number of organisations, BID, Chamber, etc., come to us as reports for information. They're included within our agenda papers, and it was felt that it would be more appropriate for reports from the Borough Council, which we rarely if ever get anyway, and from the Devon County Councillor, and I think from the I think we agreed from the police as well, actually, that it would be more acceptable if those were submitted in written form, included within the paperwork. That doesn't preclude this council from asking any one of those people to come and address the council on a specific issue, but that it would be a routine item within the paperwork, so we wouldn't have the county councillor or the borough councillor or anyone else actually presenting a report. It would simply be in the documentation, up to us to ask questions if we want to.
Okay, thank you. Members, having heard that, does anybody have any comments or questions relating to it? Councillor Palfrey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's not a question as such, it's just to if you like, support what was said just now with regard to the council reports coming in. It's to enable that to go into the public domain, if you will. Yeah. It would then be within the minutes and recorded, so people could actually access that quite easily, as opposed to it's outside of our official minutes. So it's just to, if you like, have more openness for the reports that we get, and people can see it.
Thank you for that. I should have mentioned that.
Councillor Williamson.
To add to Councillor Palfrey's comments, in that there was a secondary consideration in that if there were questions from the public, there was more available time within the early part of the meeting to take them, and so there was a hope as well that we would get public questions and have time to receive them.
Any further comments or questions? In which case, Councillor Sanders, if you'd be so kind.
I will move that motion, Mr Mayor, that we adopt these changes subject to this one section being circulated to all members of the council, and if there are any queries or problems, I think they should come back to the clerk, and if needs be, we bring it back for final confirmation at the next council meeting. But I would need a seconder.
Do I have a seconder? Lots of hands. Councillor Hutton, I think you were there first. And all in favour? And that's carried. Thank you.
278 co-location of council services. It was recommended that the Town Council continue to engage in discussions with the Borough Council regarding the progression of options. Urgent business. 279. Section 106 funding in Tavistock, brackets town, open space, sports and recreation plan, close brackets. It's recommended that, little a, the council convey its interest in principle in being involved in the production of a Tavistock open space, sports and recreation plan. B. The Council indicates to the Borough Council the possibility that after the elections in May, it anticipates reviewing whether or not to proceed with a neighbourhood plan, brackets, of which an OSSR could constitute a work stream. C. the local planning authority be requested as a matter of future practice to provide periodic Section 106 updates in the form set out in the recent communication. Little d. The matter be referred to the Development Management and Licensing Committee for consideration. 280. Tavistock Guildhall Gateway Centre. I beg to move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Members, is it your wish that these minutes be accepted, including the recommendations other than the one that we've already amended?
We'll second the proposal.
Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Right. Public conveniences. To consider the report of the Town Clerk, which hopefully you will have an opportunity to read, following the deliberations of BNP and a recent public consultation. The Clerk's report includes recommendations. Mr. Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly to draw members' attention to, I think, one or two key points. I think, first of all, this is clearly with a small p, a political decision. It's not a kind of a cost-benefit analysis, review and business case. This is about what you feel is right and appropriate for the community in all the circumstances. It's driven by the decision of West Devon Borough Council to the need to close public conveniences or to offer them to town and parish councils for taking over. And if this were to happen in Tavistock and we were to agree to take on some or all of the public conveniences, that would take effect from not this financial year coming up, but 2020-21. That said, we are looking for a decision in principle to go to the Borough Council. It's not a final and binding decision on the Council, but it's very much being mindful of the Borough Council has indicated that it will keep open toilets which we intend to take over, but that those which we do not, it would look to close. That then really takes us on to where to the options within the report. The report is working on the assumption that you might wish to take over some of the toilets. Clearly you might decide that you don't wish to, and if that's the case we advise the Borough Council accordingly, and that's an end to the matter, and the toilets would close either on or shortly after the 31st of March of this year. If you wish to take some on, the survey results certainly indicate that there is strongest public support for the Guildhall car park toilets, and that they are the most used facilities from the survey responses that we received. Looking at the other two options, we have no record beyond 2 years ago in terms of the fabric, the repair, the maintenance records of the Borough Council, so it's difficult. We know that with the bus station toilets, historically there were issues with a foul water run. We're advised by the Borough Council that those issues have improved, but not necessarily that they have been resolved. In the circumstances, we would not be recommending that those be taken over by the Town Council, and that then leaves you with the Bedford car park toilets. If you wish to have to run two sets of conveniences, the Bedford car park has got a high correlation both to visitors coming in, residents stopping there, and also to the meadows for leisure usage, so there is potential there. However, from the point of view of your officers and your surveyor, the obligation that the Borough Council at the moment is seeking to apply, which would be a full repairing lease, is wholly inappropriate and is onerous. Bear in mind, it's a listed building. We understand the fabric to be in poor condition. A full repairing lease would mean that we would take on the responsibility for 50% of all the fabric maintenance, the roof, the walls, the structure of it. Given the fact that we're offering to take on the operation of the public conveniences, all the internal maintenance, the insurance, the costs associated with that, your surveyor and your officers feel that it would be onerous to accept that. So our recommendation, if you wish to take over the Bedford car park toilets, is that we make it clear to the Borough Council that we would be happy to do so, if that is your view, subject to no full repairing obligations being applied to us. It leaves the Borough Council no worse off than it would be if we didn't take on the service at all, because that obligation sits with the landowner. But it does mean that we could then spend our money providing the service to the public for the public conveniences that are there. Bearing in mind also all refurbishment costs for public conveniences there would still fall to us. So I think we spent recently about £60,000 refurbishing the Pannier Market toilet, so there's still a significant cost factor. The other thing that the Borough Council asked review on is for those that we would be prepared to take on, whether or not we would recommend going with a pay-as-you-go option. You'll see from the report that the sums really don't stack up in relation to that, so the report doesn't indicate that that would be an appropriate way to go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Members, do you have any questions or comments you wish to make, please? Councillor Hutton.
I think this is a very useful report. I think it covers everything we want, and I'm very impressed with the number of people that have actually responded from the community and shown that toilets matter to them. I like the report, I like the conclusions. Basically, I'd go along with it. The idea that we keep the Guildhall, we run those, because we certainly need to have toilets in Tavistock. I think there is no doubt at all that to get rid of 3 lots of toilets would be wrong. I'm very mindful that we are going to have some more toilets coming online for things like the Guildhall project in a year or so. So I think we keep the Guildhall toilets, we have the Bedford car park, if we can get the borough to agree to carry on looking after the building, and we get rid of the toilets in the bus station. That would still give a lot of provision of toilets for the people of Tavistock and visitors, because it would be a disaster if we get a reputation that you come in a bus of 56 people and the first thing people want is the toilet, and they're told, afraid we haven't got any, you need to go to the pub to... Yeah. So I think it's a very good report, and I would go along with the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Squire?
I agree with the majority of that. I think it's crucial that we retain this service to the public, and we wholeheartedly support what indeed was quite a complex and full report. And I'm still yet to get my head around all the implications of the financial side. However, I would also put in a beg for a point to be considered about the bus stop toilets, because that is a service to the public which is very frequently used by people who do not use public transport. So I would bear that in mind as equally as important as the Bedford car park. However, I do appreciate and acknowledge that they are close together, and I think we need to do some considerable thought about where we put our preference. But I would wholeheartedly support the work that has been done on this and seek to financially be able to support it as a council, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I support everything else, but in terms of the bus station toilets, I noticed there was a reference to the kiosk. Does that link, is one part of my question, in terms of building, or is there any responsibility there? The other bit is that those toilets are used by the bus drivers, as well as people getting on and off buses who are waiting for buses. And the Bedford car park toilets are across the road. So, I would just also say, is there any way that we can consider keeping the bus station toilets as well? Probably not.
Okay. Mr. Park.
Sorry, just to address the question with regard to the kiosk, that was something which came up at the Budget and Policy Committee. I think there's a reference in the report to the question that we have posed. We've not received an answer from the Borough Council yet in relation to that. So I think for the purposes of where we're at, we need to treat them as being independent of the kiosk at this stage.
Okay, so members, if I could take you to the recommendation on starting on page 2.
Sorry, just in relation to the toilet, is there any mileage in linking with the bus companies and asking them about that? Because, as I say, it would be used by their drivers, I'm sure, and as well as passengers. So is there any mileage in contacting them and seeing if they can do anything?
Okay, can we come back to that in a moment? So I'd like to refer you to page 2. Paragraph 6, recommendations, little a. Consider whether or not Council wishes to take on the management of one or more of the 3 public conveniences. Is that your wish? Yes. So we have a proposal that we take on one or more. And yes, all carried? Yep. Okay. So that brings us on to B.
Mr Mayor, can I be made clear that I'm abstaining on all of these, please?
Thank you.
I won't keep popping up and down.
No, understood.
If the clerk wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sanders. Okay, so having accepted that, we now have to decide how many and which ones. And although the Town Council won't take on responsibility for these until 2020, you've already heard that the borough would like to divest itself of any that we do not wish to take on. And they want to know about that now, really. So we can't just kick this can down the road. We really have to face up to the decision-making and come to a conclusion. If we keep all three open, that will have certain implications for the council tax precept next year. If we keep two, it'll be a lesser a sum, and if we keep one, it'll be a lesser sum again. So that is a consideration that we need to bear in mind. We have some evidence as to which of the toilets are most used, although I personally would argue that 427 in a town of 12,500 isn't a very high proportion. And I'm just concerned that the usage of the bus station toilets may be underrepresented by the survey, because the survey may not have reached visitors who are travelling in and out, rather than people who are resident in the town. So I have some concerns about that. Some of these premises have a bit of a track record for causing maintenance problems. The bus station toilets, I understand, have a track record for blockage of the foul water pipes. And of course, you've heard that Bedford Car Park is only a viable proposition if we can get a non-repairing lease limited to the toilets and not have to take on any responsibility for the remainder of the building, which is a Grade 2 listed building, in an uncertain state of repair. Does that sum it up? Pretty much. So, might I suggest we just consider them one at a time? So if we focus on Guildhall toilets, what is your view about retaining the Guildhall toilets?
Well, I propose that we do.
Okay, is that seconded? Okay, Alec. Does anybody wish to debate that? So the proposal then is that Tavistock Town Council takes on responsibility for the Guildhall toilets. All in favour? Okay, that's carried. So that brings us then to Bedford and the bus station. Now the usage figures suggest that the bus station toilets are used significantly less than the Bedford car park toilets. As I said, I have reservations about the numbers, but they are rated virtually equally in importance by those who completed the survey. I think there was 0.2% difference between them.
Yes, Mr Mayor, there was 0.2% difference in terms of those facilities that were found to be least, or considered to be least important. I think one was 40.7 and one was 40.9%, sir.
Okay, thank you. So nothing between them in terms of importance, but the usage figures are very different. Okay, so how do you wish to proceed? Would anyone wish to make any comments or questions at this stage? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The only concern I had with the report was the idea that we were going to possibly be ruling ourselves out of having the Bedford toilets because of the repairing lease, which I understand the concern, and that seems quite important for us not to have to repair a Grade 2 listed building just because we're running the toilets there. But that, along with the recommendation that we don't take on the bus station, would leave the centre of town without any toilets that were public toilets. And so my question would be, could we also have a provision in the recommendation that said that were we unable to secure a non-repairing lease, or whatever that we need to do so that we don't have to take care of the outside of that building, that instead we would then consider keeping the bus station toilets open instead? Because it seemed to me that either one or the other in the centre of town probably should remain open. They both are very close to where not just the buses, the public buses, but the coaches park, and people coming from the meadows go. You know, I understand the concern about taking on the repairing lease, but it did seem to me that by then also saying to the Borough Council, well, we don't want the bus station at all, we've then shot ourselves in the foot. We have no option to retain a toilet in the centre of town, because if they don't change their position on that lease, then we've basically told them that now you're going to shut both sets of toilets in the centre of town. So, or not centre, but from my perspective, because I live on that side.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would like to recommend that we also have a provision for the bus station toilets that says we'll consider taking them on if we're unable to secure the non-repairing lease.
Okay, thank you. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, although there's no mention of that possibility in the recommendations in this report, I've got a feeling there was some mention of it in another paragraph, as that being something that we should be thinking about, an either-or arrangement. Councillor Williamson.
All I wanted to say was I would second what Councillor Mann has said. I was involved in the budget and policy. I can't remember us saying there might be a fallback. Essentially, that's what this proposition suggests. I think it's a thoroughly sensible idea.
Mm. Okay. Councillor Crawford?
Yes. Sorry, I can't find the page that I was looking for. But we are awaiting some of the reports, some of that information, like about the kiosk. So if we're awaiting that information, are we not able to put those decisions on hold until we have got that information, so we know how the bus station toilets link with the kiosk, what they're going to say about the repairs to the building, etc.
Town Clerk?
I think the answer is that's why we're asking for a decision in principle. I think some of that information isn't going to be available. Some of the information we've asked around, repairing records, survey records, conditions surveys, we know that the Borough Council will have been obliged to undertake these at different times in the past. Their records currently, in terms of what they've said they can access, only go back 2 years. Some of the things that have been asked for aren't going to be there. In terms of whether or not any of those outstanding factors in relation to things like the kiosk are going to materially affect the business case, it is unlikely. If the Borough Council is currently making a significant amount of money from the kiosk, then, quite frankly, given the fact that this is a cost-saving exercise, they're not going to hand over an income stream, and if they're not making a significant amount of money, then is it really going to affect the cost base for us taking on the toilets from that point of view? If the route that's been recommended is the one you go down, clearly, these recommendations are still seeking additional information from the Borough Council, and we will continue to do so. I think, we probably don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good, in terms of getting to a point where we can provide clarity to them and clarity to the residents of our town as to what it is that's likely to be happening. Because what I am conscious of is that the Borough Council, in terms of enabling us to run with 2020-21, is allowing us to run a year later than most other towns and parishes within the borough. And I think from our point of view, that is a significant cost saving, and therefore there's clearly some goodwill that we should be showing to them in the circumstances.
Yes, Councillor Palfrey, thank you.
Thank you. One thing that has crossed my mind on this is, it's hypothetical at the moment. Say we decided to reject 2 out of 3 or 1 out of the 3 toilets. Does that actually mean that come the 31st of this month, that toilet that we voted against is then closed, or does it stay open until such time as we take over all or the others?
If I may, my understanding is that, the reason why we're running with this at this stage is so that the Borough Council can be apprised of our decision prior to the end of this financial year. When we met with the officers from the Borough Council, they said that it would be their expectation that they would seek to close facilities which were not going to be taken over by us at the earliest opportunity. I don't know whether that means it's going to be the 1st of April, the 1st of May, or any other date, but certainly they would not be expecting to be running for an extra 12 months a facility which would not be open. So it would be when they could do it and expedite that in the most appropriate fashion.
So, members, if we're to pursue an either-or option, which way round would you see it as being most appropriate? We have the bus station toilets or the car park toilets, or we have the car park toilets, provided a suitable lease can be negotiated, or failing that, the bus station. In other words, if we're going to prioritise one over the other, which way round do we do it? Councillor Hutton.
I accept none of us like to close toilets, but I think financial-wise we're going to have to close something, because I don't think the council ratepayers want to pay for keeping all three going. So I would propose that we close the bus station car parks and keep the Bedford's car park, providing we get the repair idea from the West Devon. So providing they agree to do the maintenance of the building itself, then we will accept a closure of the bus station. That's what I would propose. But if they refuse to take over the lease agreement, then I think we say, well, we're very sorry, but we will close the Bedford car park toilets and we will keep the bus station one.
I just think there's a really important point I want to make, and I know it sounds like semantics. It's not us who's closing the toilets.
Yes.
It's the Borough Council who's closing the toilets. And I just think it's important to be clear. Thank you.
Councillor Squire.
I second that. Regretfully, I consider that the Bedford car park toilets is probably the priority of the two, although I regret having to say that.
Councillor Venning.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we should keep the Bedford one, because when you consider you've got Goose Fair, I mean, where are the people using Goose Fair? There's thousands of people go to Goose Fair. What toilets are they going to use? They're not all going to pile into the bus station, are they? Or into the Gilroy car park. So I propose that we accept the recommendations of Bedford.
The erection of portable toilets is always an option for an event, isn't it? Councillor Crawford.
I'm a bit torn, but I would suggest that the bus station toilets are just as much priority, given that bus drivers take an hour's journey to get here, then probably use the toilet, and they close the bus and nobody can get on, and then have to do another hour's journey back into Plymouth. So I think the workforce there will be very, very much put out. Plus, as well, passengers on that bus, you know, I agree that the bus isn't as frequently used as possibly it should be, and we'd like it to be if we want to keep the route open. But I think we ought to be providing that service for people who do not use their own transport, because there are quite a number of people that are still dependent on public transport.
Councillor Palfrey.
Thank you. I think I would oppose what's put on the table at the moment. I would go to keep the bus station open purely on the fact that it is next to the bus station and it is a public transport system, and it's incorporated within that, albeit that it's a toilet. And you're more likely to, if you like, take a couple of minutes out to go to the toilet next to the bus than you would be to take 5 or 10 minutes out and risk missing the bus. Therefore, you're putting yourself at risk, whereas people from a car park quite easily could walk a couple of minutes and it wouldn't really affect their journey as such, because they've already parked their car.
Would it help if I asked the clerk to spell out a little bit more about what the financial costs would be in terms of the impact on the precept? Because, as the clerk has pointed out already, this is really a political decision that we are, as members, are charged with having to make. So, Mr. Clark, if you could just make it a bit clearer to us what the financial implications would be of keeping 2 or 3 toilets open.
The projections, and I have to say that they are projections, are that we'd be looking at for the Bedford car park and Guildhall toilets around about an increase of 9.5% upon your precept. I think that goes up to around about 11.5% if you add in the bus station toilets going forwards. bear in mind that we're talking about the 2021 financial year. We don't know what other calls upon our spend are going to be within that time. We do know that we have some challenging capital projects going forward, and there's an item later on the agenda where we're talking about, and you'll have noticed in the budget and policy minutes, a potential overspend in relation to the Guildhall programme. So realistically, your very best case scenario, if you're taking on 2 of the toilets, is going to be more or less a 10% increase, and then you're looking at whatever other additional costs that there are going to be going forwards, either in terms of your capital spends, other projects which you might wish to bring forward, or indeed just making up your reserves, given the fact that your reserves are, well, fully committed, to say the least, for the next 2 years. But again, and I think that's why I sort of stressed at the beginning, it is very much a political decision and a decision for members to make, balancing all the factors which you consider are relevant in the circumstances as to how you wish to proceed.
Councillor Williamson.
I have a question really about the amenity, quality of amenity, the bus station on the one hand and the Bedford car park toilets on the other. One seems to be a much larger facility from the drawings we've received, and therefore I assume has got a greater facility for disabled people. I don't know personally about the bus station toilets, and it would be helpful if we've got this Hobson's choice, that we make it with a very clear understanding of the quality of the amenity on offer on either choice. In other words, compare apples and apples and not apples and oranges.
Do we have any comment on that? Councillor Crawford.
I think there's disabled facilities at both. There are less toilets, quite rightly, at the bus station. There are more. But I think there are disabled facilities separate for both.
Yeah. Councillor Hutton.
There is certainly, the bus station is a much smaller toilets than the car park in the...
Yeah, but they've both got separate disabled.
Yes, but there are much. It is in the bus station. It's a very small facility.
Yes, Councillor Fay.
If the consideration for the bus station is because of the usage of the passengers and the drivers, if that's our main consideration, surely it would not be pointing to go to the bus companies themselves and look for some financial reward.
Councillor Squire.
I'd just like to ratify the previous discussion about the prioritisation I see for the Bedford car park. We are also recognising it's adjacent to the Meadows, which is our major recreational area, and I would see that as an added factor which outbalances the issue about the bus station, which is about 150 yards away.
Thank you, good point. Councillor Venning.
I'm not going back on what I said before, but I do believe that an advantage for the bus station would be the fact that the bus station is used right up until 10 o'clock at night, I believe, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what time the last buses run, but they could keep, on the things of the opening and closing times, you could close the ones in the bus station later than you would close the ones in the Bedford car park.
They're all the same. They're all subject to the same contract for opening and closing times.
Okay, but, but what I'm saying, it would be easier to keep the bus station open than it would be the one in the Bedford car park.
Councillor Mann.
Just to address your point, because I agree with the question about the bus drivers and the public transport, TAS is located there. And one of the things that was mentioned in the report was, where are these people going to go? Because people are going to go, right? So at the bus station, there is another set of toilets that's there that are quite accessible. There's quite a nice set of toilets in the TAS buildings. Perhaps it's something that we could ask TAS what their thoughts would be about perhaps arranging for the bus drivers in particular to have a special dispensation in which, if that was to happen, which would allow at least the people, like you said, who are working there and have no other facilities to be able to use toilets, because I think the reality is people are going to have to use the toilets. So where we close them, if we can at least direct that group of people who really have a dire need. And then the other, yeah, I agree, they will have to go across the road to the Bedford toilets, but they would still have a public toilet available to them. But that would address the question for the bus drivers in that space. And I think in each of these cases, if you do close them, I think that was one of the concerns about closing the Guildhall toilets, was that then they're just going to come into the market toilets. So we would be having an additional usage anyway. And I think that's the same with the Bedford. I think more people will go to Meadowlands. So it's not like they don't go. So I just think in that particular instance, we might be able to address the concern about bus drivers separately.
Okay, thank you. If I could just reiterate, it is not, and for the benefit of anybody who may be watching this on streaming, it is not the Town Council who is proposing to close the toilets. Councillor Crawford.
Yes. I agree, and I think TAS is very near. So if we could liaise with TAS, and I think, as I say, the bus companies, then perhaps we can sort of sort that out for the drivers coming into the bus station and the public who use those facilities.
Okay. Can we have a proposal that reflects this discussion and what we see as our priorities? Councillor Hutton.
I propose then that we fully keep the Guildhall car park open, that we go for having the Bedford car park open, providing West Devon agree to take over the lease of the building and looking after this Grade 2 building. And if they agree to that, if West Devon agree to that, then we close the bus station. They close, sorry, I
do not take
rephrase it. They will then close that one, and we are not going to take it over. If they will not take over the lease, the maintenance of the Bedford, then we will they will close the Bedford, and we will say that we will take over paying for the bus station toilet.
Okay, so we have a proposer, we have a seconder. Shall we move to a vote? All in favour?
That's carried.
And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Just item C, in relation to charging item 3.
Oh yes, okay. I'm sorry, we haven't quite left the toilets, ladies and gentlemen. There are a couple of other little bits that we just need to deal with. There's recommendation 6, paragraph 6, recommendation C. This relates to what has been elegantly described as pay-as-you-go, pay-as-you-pee, if you like. Do we wish to introduce charging? Now, the pros and cons of charging have been set out in the report, and the likely gain over expense of introducing charging. What are your views on whether we introduce charging or not? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Within the report and in the previous papers that I certainly have been privy to, it was outlined that by Healthmatic, which I guess is a group that looks at the use of public conveniences, there are currently 50,000 current users per facility in Tavistock. If there was to be a pay-as-you-go scheme there, that would probably typically reduce to 20,000. So I would ask the question as what happens to those people who are not paying to use the public toilets? I think it probably brings about public health issues, and I think we need to be very clear that we certainly wouldn't wish to see any issues of people not using the toilets and using the churchyard or the market road or wherever to relieve themselves. I think also each machine, the maintenance on each machine was listed here as £900 for each facility, and by the time you incorporate the cost of either collecting the cash or dealing with the, if we're using swipe cards, the transactions, I don't think there's very much to be made using 20 pence, which is the suggested through these reports, fee for using the public toilets. So I really think that there will be very little margin on us charging, having a pay-as-you-go scheme.
Thank you. Any other views? Can we have a proposal then that we do not seek charging? Okay. Those who wish to introduce charging? None. Okay. So no charging, thank you. And then little d, subject to agreement on the foregoing points, our officers be authorised to proceed with the necessary arrangements pending any further instructions of Council. All in favour? Thank you. Item 7, Development, Management and Licensing Committee. Councillor Hutton.
Right, I rise to present the minutes of the 5th of February. 264, apologies for absence. 265, confirmation of minutes. 266, declarations of interest. 267, Dartmoor National Park. 268, town planning issues. I'd just like to mention for this, we've received last couple of days a reply from Devon County Council about Section 106 money, which I suspect, do I forward this to members just of the planning committee, or is this, I think, something that maybe all councillors would be interested in, because it's certainly something my committee has thought about, that we need to be monitoring 106 money a little bit more carefully in the future to make sure that the agreed 106 money actually sees to do something and it appears. So I wonder whether this needs to come to my committee first, or whether it's something I could just ask the Assistant Town Clerk to send this out to everybody.
Members, is it your wish that you all see this letter?
Yes, please.
Sorry.
If I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please
I was just conferring with the Assistant to the Town Clerk. I think from conversations she's had with yourself, she was going to put it on the plans agenda. That means it will go to all members of Council in any event, but it will also provide you with the opportunity to consider it alongside the open spaces and recreation plan proposal, which came from, has been referred from budget and policy, because one of the things specific in that proposition is consideration of Section 106 monies and the format in which that could be, so there's a natural tie in there.
Right. Okay,
I think that's absolutely fine. Good. But it's good that we've got a reply. 269, general correspondence. 270, urgent business. 271, planning decisions. So I'd like to suggest that that's moved.
Okay.
But before we do that, can I also present the minutes from the 26th? Sorry, yes, I need to say, on the last ones, we need to have the council agreement to the recommendations that we sent up about the planning numbers. So if we now go to the 26th of February meeting, minutes 280, 281, 282, 283, 284, 285. Now, there are one or two things here that it might be just useful to mention on 285. One is that in future West Devon are not going to send us the paper copies of all the planning applications, so that means that if members, not only the committee but obviously council members, wish to look at plans in the future, they'll have to go through the planning portal and look on the internet, because we will not have them over here. That's something that we've got to get used to, and is obviously a bit of a problem for one or two members who are not as computer savvy as others. But we've got a way around that. We think hopefully we can get around that. The second thing we need to talk about is they've asked us to put some names forward for the new development on New Lawston Road, and I emailed members a few days ago about any suggestions for this. The results of my consultation were very disappointing, as only one member actually gave us some suggestions. Oh, sorry, we have two members. So we have some, I think, I'd like to bring them up to the meeting, because we need a response, really. So can I suggest that I have had suggestions of wildflowers, because the idea, this is Broadlea, which is apparently a bit like Broad Meadows, is the idea of the field. And what's been suggested are some wildflowers or herbs. So if I just go through the wildflowers, which I must say I think is very good. Cowslip, foxglove, honeysuckle, bramble, celandine, cornflower, poppy, daisy and dandelion. They're all names that have not been used so far in Tavistock. Or the herbs, for those who know their herbs, parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. You're thinking of the kids' TV coriander, fennel, basil, dill and mint. So there's some suggestions that we've got from the Deputy Mayor, which I think are very good. So can I just let
Deputy Mayor
Councillor
would like to speak. Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I note that you found it quite amusing, but I was just trying to stimulate some other suggestions by putting mine forward. I apologise for the list of herbs.
Councillor Fay?
Yeah, I've gone along the route of notable people from Tavistock. We have the poet William Brown. There was Sir John Maynard. Canada's first cabinet minister, lady, female, was born here. Her maiden name was Spear. We have Rundle, another famous name of an MP. Collins. Then I've got Britton, who was a landscape artist. Then you've got William Morris, who was lived here for some time, involved in the window at St Eustatius's. Larkham was the chaplain to Cromwell's army. Miss Heaton was the first matron of Tavistock Hospital when it opened. Then you had George Spencer, was the first publisher of the Tavistock Gazette. And then you had Falston, who was the architect of the Guildhall Square. So I thought it was a connection of... So I've also then gone on to mention shopkeepers and various people that were marketers in the past.
Okay, thank you. If I might ask Councillor Sanders, sorry to wake you up.
I was doing quite well, actually. What can I do for you, Mr. Mayor?
Am I right in thinking that there is an issue with using people's names for the naming
both
process?
past and present people's names haven't been used for some considerable time, certainly in West Devon, and I think most other councils now. That was already happening before we got into the situation of Jimmy Savile, and those of you who are familiar with Bristol will know at the attempts already one of the Colstons, Colston School I think has been renamed. The Colston Hall hasn't yet been renamed, but there is a battle royal going on over that. So it is generally not acceptable now, considered acceptable to use names past or present, because either you were made a fortune out of the slave trade, or you fiddled with kids or whatever. So it's generally speaking now something that is not usually acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So,
Can I go back to sleep?
Yeah, you can. Yes.
so
I'll let
thank
you know
for
when
that,
we
but
need to wake up.
here we can't use it. Has anybody else got any suggestions? I mean, I like the wildflowers.
Yes,
I mean, has anybody got any problems with we suggest the wildflowers? Shall we? Do we need a vote on that?
Yeah.
All right. The Mayor better do the vote.
The Mayor would be very happy with those, and the Mayor is perfectly happy to propose that the names of wildflowers be forwarded as suggestions for the naming of these roads. Am I seconded?
Yeah.
All in favour? Done.
Good, thank you very much. So, just carrying on with the minutes, there was another thing about that there's going to be a new 30-mile speed limit on Callington Road. This is because of the building. We recommended that the planning committee supported this 30-mile-an-hour limit because obviously we've got to protect people. But we also thought that we want some sort of visual warning signs about the fact that the speed limit has gone down as well. So we've suggested that. Just the rest of the minutes, 286.
Councillor Sanders.
Yes, sorry.
Mr Mayor, in terms of accuracy, the acronym VAS has got 56 different meanings, I think, but in this context it stands for Vehicle Activated Sign, not a visual alert system, although I think it does also stand for visual alert, but in this context, the 30-mile-an-hour limit has to happen. It was a condition that was applied to the planning consent. I don't understand the reference to it either at both ends of the extended speed limit area, because the 30-mile-an-hour limit starts just this side of Anderton Lane, I think, now in that direction, and I can't think where it starts and other things. So one end of it, the new end of it, if you like, I can understand. but the 30 mile an hour limit starts as you enter Tavistock and is all...
Yeah. Councillor Sanders, you've just confused me because you mentioned Anderton Lane, but this refers to Camden Lane.
Yeah, what I'm saying, Mr Mayor, this says at both ends of the extended speed limit area. The extended speed limit area going towards Cornwall is fine, but the other end is on various roads leading into Tavistock, so I didn't really understand that. And while I'm on my feet, just to say that at last Tuesday's development management meeting at the Borough Council, the reserved matters application on behalf of this Bovis Homes Phase 1 was approved, and I had a phone call from the planning officer yesterday morning to say that either yesterday or sometime today the planning consent was due to be issued to the developer. There are still certain conditions that have got to be discharged, but the developer will, as of today, in fact, will be in possession of a clear planning consent to proceed with Phase 1, and I think their intention is hopefully to get on site towards the end of summer, July, August time. I mean, that's a decision for Bovis, obviously a financial decision in terms of whether they think they can sell the houses. But I just thought people might like to know that that actual decision's now been made.
Right, shall I just finish these off? 286, 287, and on 287 this is a view, we'd like a recommendation from Town Council that the views of the committees listed in Appendix B are carried. And that's proposed.
Thank you very much. All in favour? Agreed, thank you. Okay. So that brings us on to items circulated for information, beginning with 8 service reports. This is your opportunity to ask questions, members, if you wish. So 8, little 1, General Manager's report. Do you have any questions to put to the General Manager? You're going to let him off lightly? I think we might have to. So little 2, Works Department. Little 3, Town Hall and Butchers Hall.
Chairman, are we dealing with the... We've got a separate thing on the Town Hall and Markets Consultative Group. Has that come up as part of this, or is it a separate item on the agenda?
I think that's a forthcoming meeting, isn't it, Councillor Sanders?
Agenda for a forthcoming meeting.
It is indeed, yeah. Could I just... Yeah, okay. I've got comments, but I'll save them for now.
You sure?
Well, it's just that there are acronyms all over certain bits of it. In some places they're indicated what they are, in other places they aren't, which makes it very difficult, and there's no real consistency with it. And item 7, the Lumber and Rise Park and Ride, hopefully that's moved on a bit. But early to talk about that, perhaps.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, Roman numeral little 4, Pannier Market. Okay, received. Good. 9, Finance and Other Matters. Report of the Assistant to the Town Clerk. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question regarding item 9, which was the implementation of the General Data Protection Regulations when all councillors who were available attended the training. I understand that training was compulsory training, and I just wonder whether there will be another opportunity for those who were unable to attend at that time to attend some more training on that or something like that, possibly now into the new council year.
Yes, the answer is yes.
In the new council year.
Are there any other questions relating to the Assistant to the Town Clerk's report? For my information, members, how many of you have received a copy of the newsletter through your letterbox at home? No, and I haven't either. It's been distributed to 5,000 residential properties, but not to any of the properties belonging to members. Are we being excluded?
I used to deliver newspapers like that.
Okay. 9B, Tavistock Bid Company, minutes of the meeting. 9C, project update. Little 1, Townscape Heritage Initiative Public Realm, General Manager.
I've really got nothing to add from what was identified in my General Manager's report. Apart from that, we had some early project delays when we were undertaking some excavation works and found some old remnants, and the way forward has been agreed with the planning authority and the project is back on track.
Thank you. And Roman 2, Guildhall Gateway Centre Project, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really a follow-on to the consideration by the Budget and Policy Committee of the projected overspend in relation to the Guildhall project. And I think there a particular point of concern was that if we were unable to satisfactorily address that through a planned approach, we might not be allowed by Heritage Lottery Fund to go out to tender. We have had a conversation with Heritage Lottery Fund when they attended for the monitor meeting. We have shown them our projections in terms of anticipated grant drawdown from sources other than Heritage Lottery Fund. We have come up with some proposals for value engineering within the project, and they are happy for us to go out to tender. Clearly, if we get to the point where, having gone to tender, any significant changes are required to be made, we would need to come back both to yourselves as the accountable body, Tavistock Town Council, and to Tavistock Heritage Trust as the partner body in delivery of that. But at the moment, just to say that we have the authority to go to tender, and we will do so accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that item? Okay, so D, Herder. Ladies and gentlemen, we will shortly be going into Purda. For some of us, this will be a new experience, and the Town Clerk has kindly offered just to say a few words about that to help us begin to understand what it means.
Essentially, Purda places obligations both upon councils and upon councillors during the immediate run-up to the election period. I won't go into the obligations placed upon the council. I think for the purposes of yourselves, the key thing to remember is that from the 26th of March, please do not use council resources as part of your electioneering programme. Now, whether that's council buildings, whether it is council computer, council email addresses, just please distinguish between your electioneering activities and your promotional activities if you are standing for election, and do not use council resources for that, use your own private resources. Essentially what Purda does is it's intended to be a protection mechanism whereby the resources of the organisation are not used inadvertently or even intentionally to promote the candidacy of individual candidates and therefore give them an unfair advantage.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just add to
Please.
that? I mean, it includes things like not having your photograph taken at presentations and stuff like that. I'm afraid you just can't do it. If you're standing for election, you need to completely remove yourself from that sort of role. You know, the whole Purda business is quite serious. If you fall foul of it, then you're very likely to find yourself, even if you get elected, you're very likely to find yourself no longer being elected because moves will be made against you by the authorities. It's a pretty serious business. So.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
So just a question, are you allowed to refer to the fact that you are currently a council officer?
Yes, you can do that, that's fine.
Yeah,
But what you can't do is be seen handing over a cheque to the local nursery or, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mann. Councillor Fay, would you mind turning off your microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you are anticipating, that's only in relation to doing council business. Is that what you mean? Like, you could be in the paper for other purposes?
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't say, and this is so-and-so who is a councillor, if it's just,
No, if you want to do something like that, providing you don't do it as a councillor and providing the photograph doesn't refer to you as a councillor, if it's something that you're doing something with a scrap store and James comes and takes a photograph of you, as long as it doesn't refer to Councillor Mann, the scrap store, then you're okay. What you can't do is say, Councillor Mann, in charge of Tavistock Scrap School makes a massive contribution towards reducing the plastic thing.
Okay.
Okay. We may need to have some informal discussion about this at some point, just to clarify a few points.
I mean, there is a very useful link to a short guide to Purda there, and I would commend it to all members to go and have a look at. It is a short read, so it's not a long one, but it does cover off the key points. It's produced by the Local Government Association, and it's well worth looking at.
Thank you very much. Okay. 9E continues the theme of Purda, but as it relates more to councils, I think, rather than councillors. Is that correct? But well, there's another link there.
Both.
Yeah, so there's another link there to follow if you're standing again. And any update from or questions to council representatives serving on other outside bodies? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Council will know, I am the representative on what was Destination Oakhampton, which is now being disbanded. I have been invited by people in Oakhampton to join the Oak Rail Forum, which will be looking at the return of the railway to Oakhampton. And there is a meeting on Thursday, and I ask for Council's permission for me to move along to this group rather than Destination Oakhampton, which is no longer in operation, please.
Okay, and Councillors happy that the Deputy Mayor proceeds as suggested?
Happy to propose that, Chair.
Second? In favour?
Thank you.
You have Council's permission.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to mention Kingdom House, where I'm appointed by the Town Council. The Phase 1 work to the exterior of the building is progressing very nicely indeed. I'm not sure how much longer it will be before the scaffolding will come down, but we're very pleased with the way that the work's been done. It's to a very high standard, and we're very much looking forward to it coming down, and hopefully the outside of the building being watertight and fit for purpose for the foreseeable future.
Good news. Any other reports, members? Okay. Item 10, communications.
Sorry.
Deputy Mayor.
I do beg your pardon. As the Town Council representative, I think there's only 3 things I'm represented to go. There's the Farmers Market AGM, which I attended not last Saturday, but the Saturday before, I think. And very interesting to see the work of the Farmers Market in Tavistock, and they were extremely pleased that somebody from the Town Council has shown an interest and gone along to their AGM. So thank you.
Excellent, well done. I also understand that Dan the Fishman would be more than happy to take part in our Town Hall and Markets consultative group if he were to be invited. I just put that down as a marker. Okay. I always have long conversations with Dan the Fishman. It takes amazing how long it can take to buy a cod. Councillor Williamson.
I just remembered that I'm the council's designated director on the bid. The bid are, for information for our members here, are assigning members of the bid board of directors responsibility as street ambassadors. I think I've got the term right, in that they will be a point of contact with retail and commercial premises within the town. So I've been given a block to walk the streets, and my co-directors have. So if you have retailers who want to talk to the bid, you'll probably need to see the list of who's responsible for that, and I'll ask our bid manager when we clear about the assignments to send perhaps a list to the clerk, and it can be, I don't know, sent out by the assistant to town clerk to councillors. It's just for information, really.
Thank you. Can I go on to 10 now?
Sorry.
Okay. I haven't got any communications for you anyway, so we'll go on to the next one. 11, urgent matters brought forward. I have no urgent matters to bring forward. Can someone propose we move to part 2, please? Councillor